Good morning, Nigeria, and welcome to Daybreak on Trust Television. It's a beautiful Wednesday morning. It rained yesterday, but the skies seem to be free this morning to allow for easy commuting within the city center. I am Sunday Michael Ogu, and it promises to be an interesting show today.
And I am Ayuba Ilya. Thank you so much for joining us on Daybreak this morning. It promises to be a great show, really. All the matters that are arising from what we have seen in the past few days, the reactions to comments, the revelations coming out from government, quarters, and specifically in that regard, there's this revelation about the 800,000 liters of fuel, crude oil rather, that is being stolen, and fortunately it was intercepted by the hired security forces.
Absolutely. You see, so much has been said about that theft, and two things are alarming for me. One, the speed with which we are quick to destroy those kind of assets. Two, the sophistication of those theft. It shows clearly that, because every time we talk about crude oil theft, the story is around people who take 50-liter jerrycans on a bike or in a canoe to Cameroon or Togo and all of that. This is happening at a massive scale.
Exactly.
And at that level, sometimes you want to think that it takes the cooperation of the high and the mighty,
exactly.
And to think that this has been going on since 2021.
Yes, and I mean, when you think about it, when I heard 800,000 liters, I asked myself, Nigeria itself, how much crude oil does it produce in a day? I mean, mostly we talk about 1.92 million at the most, you have 2.2 million barrels.
That's right.
Per day. So if you have someone or some persons taking 800,000 liters, I mean, that's huge. And
it means we woke up as a country, the entire country went to work, took all the resources we realized that day and passed it on to a channel that is unaccountable. That's, to put it mildly, that is how it sounds. But I hope that beyond this penchant for destruction, this quick destruction of what I would call tangible evidence and all of that, we can, dig further deep and try to unravel the cartel, behind what appears to be an organized crime.
Right.
And I mean, maybe the president can throw in his words. That batch that is used can be seized, forfeited, and converted to some local use. Now we are talking about how to move crude to the Dangote refinery. Maybe this kind of seizures, because locally, when you seize assets from stolen assets, you get a forfeiture from the bank. You don't destroy it. It is your own wealth that was stolen and used for that purpose. So in a way, that's your asset under the control of cartel. I don't see any sense in destroying it. Well,
good enough that it has been intercepted, and we hope to see more. Aside
Absolutely.
the arrest, aside the interception, we want to see arrest. We want to see people, face the wrath of the law.
That's right.
In this regard.
All right, moving on to the highlight we have for you this morning. Tinubu orders manhunt for Plateau Benue killings.
Senate probes oil subsidy, frowns at 9.3 trillion naira spent in 30 months.
And not all borders are reopened. Review process underway, according to the Custom DG.
All right. Now to the details. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has directed security agencies to fish out the masterminds of what he called dastardly acts of killings in Mangu local government area of Plateau State and parts of Benue State. The president, in a statement issued by his spokesman, Dele Alake, condemned the most recent internecine killings. Now, the president expressed sadness and grief over the latest round of violence in Plateau State, describing the festering reprisal attacks as needless and avoidable bloodletting among communities in two states as very depressing. He, however, charged the governments of Plateau and Benue states and emergency response agencies to provide support and immediate relief to victims who have been displaced as a result of the conflict. The president reaffirmed his government's determination to stamp out violent crimes and all forms of criminality everywhere in Nigeria. President Tinubu urged community leaders, religious leaders, traditional rulers, socio-cultural organizations, as well as the leadership of the Arewa Consultative Forum, Jamaatul Nasrul Islam, and Christian Association of Nigeria to work together to help foster genuine and long-lasting peace, rebuild trust, and restore harmony to the conflict areas.
All right, and from the presidency to the parliament, the Senate has resolved to probe payments made as oil subsidy and under recovery by former President Muhammadu Buhari's government. The Red Chamber described as unacceptable the 9.3 trillion, which the Buhari administration claimed it expended on the subsidy regime from January 2021 to May 29, 2023. The upper legislative chamber urged the present administration to establish 3 functional refineries for local production and distribution of refined oil products. The chamber said doing so would reduce the pump price of premium motor spirit, also known as petrol, from the current 540 per litre to between 300 to 250 per litre. It also appealed to the federal government to pay living wages to workers as a way of cushioning the effect of petrol subsidy removal. Majority of the senators in their various contributions during the debate on the motion frowned upon the bogus expense made on the subsidy regime by NNPCL and supported all the prayers sought by Senator Chuwuba Nwabueze in the motion.
All right. Now, the Acting Controller General of Customs Service, as the Nigeria Customs Service, Wale Adeni, has clarified that not all borders in the country have been reopened, and a thorough review process is currently underway. He disclosed this to State House correspondents after meeting with President Bola Tinubu at the presidential villa in Abuja. Now, according to him, while selected strategic borders were reopened in 2022, a review process is currently underway to assess the objectives of the border closure. The customs boss disclosed that as part of efforts to enhance border security and regional integration, he plans to visit the Republic of Benin to engage in discussions with their customs administrations.
All right, and that's it on a highlight of this. Moving on to packages, Vice President Kashim Shettima on Tuesday met with 2 state governors from the northern part of the country at the State House in Abuja to discuss pressing issues and work out solutions to the challenges of flooding and insecurity. Gombe State Governor Inuwa Yahaya urged relevant stakeholders to urgently seek solution to the problem of flooding across the country. On the other hand, Jigawa State Governor Umar Namadi said remedial efforts were already being taken to meet the challenges of flooding in his states. Kainde Amodu brings us the report.
Flooding has already started rearing its head in many states across the country. The problems related with last year's torrents have not been properly tackled, and it seems the overflows are on again. Governor Yahaya says the deluge that comes with rains is now a national challenge.
We must work as one people. The problem of flooding is virtually a national issue now. You know, global warming and climate change is affecting all the globe. And for that, we are strategizing. We wouldn't like a repeat of what happened last year to do the same this year. But in whatever we do, we have to be both proactive and reactive.
The Gombe State Governor, who is chairman of the Northern Governors Forum, explains that flooding in the north is most often than not as a result of the overflow of water from rivers Niger and Benue and their tributaries. But there are other problems.
There is siltation, a lot of siltation, and also as a result of poor farming practices and deforestation. The forests and our farms have now turned and gave way for the desert, and those exacerbated siltation that takes place along the streams and the rivers.
But some state governors are not waiting for the federal government to provide remedies.
The flooding in Jigawa State is really a serious issue, and as a government we are doing so many things. We have set up a technical committee of experts, and they are looking at how they can, in fact they have submitted a report, and part of the report we have started implementing. We have bought 2 excavators, and also Hade Jamara bought 2 excavators. As of today, we are able to dredge the river about 36 kilometers, and we have removed the taifa grass.
Discussions between the governors and Vice President Shettima also revolved around insecurity in the north. Origins of rustling banditry and kidnapping for ransom have been attributed to the struggle for land resources and the encroachment of grazing reserves, cattle routes, and even forest reserves. But this is not a new narrative. The question is, how will problems that have to do with security be resolved?
As the chairman of the Northern Governors Forum, I will ensure that we get to the roots of all those problems, and through the support of the various state governments and the federal government itself, we come up with the solutions, things that will trigger positive action and reaction, not the negatives.
As a government, we will do our best also by involving all the stakeholders, that is traditional rulers, the ulamas, and everybody will be on board to ensure that we sustain the security situation in Jigawa State.
Vice President Kashim Shettima continues to engage stakeholders and is pulling his weight in the support of the president in the interrogation of solutions to some of the nation's pressing challenges. From State House, Abuja, Kehinde Amudu, Trust TV News.
All right, now the Senate President, Godswill Akpabio, has appointed chairmen of some key committees in the Senate. The Senate President made the announcement during Tuesday's plenary. The report.
According to the Senate President, Godswill Akpabio, Solomon Adeola, who head the Appropriation Committee, while Ali Ndume is the Vice Chairman. Ahmed Wadada is heading the Public Accounts Committee, while Adaramon Raphael is Chairman Senate Committee on Media. Others are Committee on Rules and Business, headed by Titus Sam Tangeta, Committee on Senate Services, led by Sunday Karimu, and Code of Conduct and Public Petitions, headed by Okechukwu Eze. The Committee on National Security and Intelligence has Shehu Buba Umar as its head, while Garuba Musa leading that on legislative compliance. Announcing the composition of the committees, the Senate President Godswill Akpabio also inaugurated the Selection Committee. While the Selection Committee comprises all principal officers, Akpabio said the Appropriation Committee, headed by Solomon Adeola, was set up in the event of any emergency supplementary budget that may arise from the executive. The inauguration is in line with Senate standing rules, which empowers the Parliament to, within 14 days after inauguration, set up the aforementioned committees.
Distinguished Senators Adeola Solomon Olamileko will be the chairman, followed by Distinguished Senator Mohammed Ali Ndume as vice chairman.
The names of other committee chairmen are to be announced at a later date. Rashidat Yusuf for Trust TV News.
And from the Senate to the House of Representatives, the House of Representatives has appealed to the National Security Advisor to declare the killings in Plateau State a national emergency. This was sequel to a motion of urgent public importance by Representative Dachong Bogos from Plateau State on the terrorist attack on Mangu communities of Mangu and Bokos Federal Constituency of Plateau State on Tuesday at plenary. The report.
The recent terrorist attacks on the people of Mangu local government and neighboring communities have left more than 300 persons dead and others seriously injured, property destroyed, and over 18,000 people displaced at different IDP camps within the local government area. According to the lawmaker, most of the victims that sustained various degrees of injuries are currently receiving medical attention at different hospitals within the state. He expressed worry that the continuous attack by terrorist groups in the communities, if not addressed immediately, will negatively affect farming, which will worsen the existing food crisis in the communities.
Concerned that most of my people live in fear of the unknown due to insecurity and can no longer access their farmlands and their mining sites. Further concerned that unless the issue of insecurity is handled with doggedness at all levels in the country, citizens will experience food shortage, as Plateau is one of the main producers of food crops in the country.
Lawmakers want security operatives to provide aerial surveillance and support to flush out the terrorists and destroy their camps to avoid reoccurrence and allow farmers to return to their farms and ancestral homes.
Handle the killings going on in Plateau State as a national emergency because of the gravity of which these killings are being done and the constant reoccurrence. I believe if the Office of the National Security Advisor comes into this, there will be a difference.
The House unanimously adopted the motion and urged the Secretary to the Government of the Federation to direct the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management and Social Development through the National Emergency Management Agency (NEMA) and the National Commission for Refugees, Migrants and Internally Displaced Persons to immediately provide relief materials to victims of the attacks in the communities within Mangu local government area. In another development, the House of Representatives has called for the suspension of the implementation of increase in tuition fees in universities. This was equal to a motion sponsored by Aliyu Sani Madaki, who noted the hike in fees by universities is happening against the worsening poverty level in the country, inflation high rate of employment, and the recent fuel price hike.
Also concerned that the increase could cause disruptions for a number of students who could not afford the fees, while many of them could be forced to depart their studies. Others could drop out. Worried that the hike may aggravate the already volatile situation in the country, as students are already making threats which could lead to an uprising with grievous consequences for the country as a whole.
He urged the National Universities Commission to immediately halt implementation of the increase in fees by federal universities while mandating the Committee on Tertiary Education and Services, when constituted, to investigate the increase in fees by federal universities across the country with a view to finding lasting solutions to the challenges in the tertiary education sector.
The chairman of the Nigerian Labour Congress NLC Zamfara State Council, Sani Haliru, and his Trade Union Congress counterpart, Saidu Mudi, are appealing to governments at all levels to honor their promise of providing palliatives to workers in order to cushion the effect of the fuel subsidy removal on workers. They made the call while speaking in an interview with Trust TV in Gusau, the state capital.
The state chairman of the Nigerian Labour Congress, NLC, Zamfara State Council, Sani Halilu, and his Trade Union Congress of Nigerian counterpart, Saidu Mudi.
All right, that's it. At this hour, we will take a short breather. When we return, the show continues. Please stay with us. All right, welcome back. Now, according to experts, Nigerian banks are very low on, Nigeria ranks very low on the global ease of paying taxes. The country's tax to GDP ratio is one of the lowest in the world and well below the African average. In order to transform the tax system to support sustainable development and achieve a minimum of 18% tax to GDP ratio within the next 3 years without stifling investments or economic growth, President Tinubu has set up a presidential committee on fiscal policy and tax reforms. The committee comprises experts from both the private and public sector, and it's responsible for various aspects of tax laws reforms, fiscal policy designs and coordination, harmonization of taxes, and revenue administration. As the committee tries to address the key challenges in Nigeria's tax system, such as multiple taxes and revenue collection agencies, fragmented and complex tax system, low morale and high prevalence of tax evasion, high cost of revenue administration, and lack of coordination between fiscal and economic policies, and poor accountability to the utilization of taxes. We have in the studio Mr. Babatunde Oladapo, the Executive Secretary of the West African Tax Administration Forum. Sorry, we have standing by on Zoom, I beg your pardon. And we are also expecting in the course of this conversation, the President of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, Mr. Samuel Abelui. Gentlemen, how do I put it? Mr. Oladapo, good morning and thanks for joining us this morning.
Yeah, good morning to you, sir.
All right.
And I can see the President.
Absolutely. We recently had the President talked about, set up the tax committee, and it does appear that their works are cut out for them, chaired by a very eminent tax expert from the PwC. What do you think? How much do you think we can achieve with this reform in the lights of their terms of reference?
Series of them dating back as far as 1950. We have several of them, more than 24 as support, bringing in different perspectives based on what the issues are, of the days are. So this current attempt is a good one. It shows that this current regime understands the importance of tax revenue to building government institutions and funding development. Yeah, it's a big mandate and it's achievable. And with what we've seen, the government have mentioned the chairman, but jokingly I will ask, where are the other members of the committee? Those are questions begging for answer. We need to know the other people on that. The chairman is a creditable member of the tax community. He's a member of both ICANN and Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria. He has done several contributions to the national discourse in building effective tax administrations in Nigeria. And like it is said, a tree cannot make a forest. We need to know those who are going to work with them. And then also the terms of reference looks beautiful on paper, but there's always a money after the wedding. What happens in terms of support that the government will give them, because their role is purely advisory, and I'm sure they are not going out there to collect taxes. They can provide solutions. But we need to be sure that the government apparatus saddled with the responsibilities of collecting taxes and also making tax policy should be able to support whatever the committee will do as we go forward. So for me, it's a good step in the right direction. It's a sign that the government is taking very good steps. And for taxpayers, I'm sure they are rejoicing. The government has rolled back the excise tax, He's doing a couple of things. And so it's a good time for everybody, taxpayers and tax administration, but we will wait to see what will happen as members of the committee are brought on board, and then we'll wait to see how well they can work with government apparatus to ensure that taxes are effectively administered in our jurisdiction, Nigeria. I will take a pause here.
Okay. All right, let's go to Mr. Samuel. If you can hear me. Okay, we'll get to Mr. Samuel subsequently, but let's stay with you, Mr. Babatunde. What are some of the areas that you think that this committee should be focusing on that requires, the urgent attention?
Okay, so sorry, I have a president here who is my president of the Charter Institute of Taxation, and I think protocol demands that you allow the man who leads the practice of taxation in Nigeria to have a bite, if you don't mind.
It appears we have a bit of challenge getting him on board, and that's the issue.
Okay, I understand we now have him. We have a clear line to him now. He's passed the baton to you. Welcome on board, and we would like to hear what areas you think, as Elias said, you think are pertinent within this harmonization drive.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I, just like my colleague has said, Babatunde Oladapo, the government has started on a good note. And just like he said, tax reform is not new. It has been for decades. And tax by its nature is very dynamic. So not necessarily because we're having a new government, but because tax relates to economic activities, and economic activities is not static. So the reform is setting up a committee for the reform is a welcome development. And also, the chairman is somebody we know his pedigree. So I think the good time is there. Now, what area should we be focusing on? There have been a lot of issues that are crying for the attention of the government. And it's not just that our tax to GDP ratio is low because we are Nigerians. It's just that because we have not done well, those things we need to do well, and we need to move forward. On a positive note, the Bureau of Statistics recently gave us the information that we have moved from 6% to about 10.86%. But we need to do far better because 10% is even below the West African average. Now, the question is, what are those things not going on right? And why are we not getting what we need, what we should get ordinarily? I will place above any other thing accountability and transparency. Nigeria has been used to getting revenue from oil money over the years, and you agree with me, the accountability and transparency from this experience has not been that good. But tax revenue or tax obligation to an average citizen is a burden, and nobody wants to give you his money when he's not sure that you are going to use it very well. So the government must from day one demonstrate transparency and accountability. The government officials need to tone down on unnecessary affluence. You need to build the confidence of the populace. If you don't do that, they are not going to give you their money for you to handle for them. So most people in the country agree that there's a trust deficit in the country as a result of our experience over the years. So you need to close that gap of a trust deficit, build the confidence on the people. Once they give you X amount of money, and the Nigerians are reasonable and good people, they can relate with what you are using the money for, then of course, voluntary compliance will take place. For those of us who are in the tax profession, we know that voluntary tax compliance is far better than enforcement, because enforcement has its cost. So the first thing I will be recommending to the government is transparency, build the confidence, bring back the taxpayer to trust you, erase the trust deficit. Once that is done, then of course we can move to the next level. And the next level for me is the humongous list of various taxes that is out there for people to pay. We don't need to have 58 different types of taxes before you collect money. So, and it's been said that 90% of these taxes, of our tax revenue, is actually from a very few number of tax types. So we need to rejig this, because the moment you have an elongated list of type of taxes to collect from people, you bring confusion. You bring a kind of chaos to the system. Adam Smith, several centuries ago, said that economic of collection, certainty, and other things are paramount in the collection of taxes. So I will be looking at drastically the reduction of these various type of taxes that people are made to pay. Right. That is on the side of type of taxes.
My chairman, just before you conclude your thoughts, there are the school of thoughts that argues that we thought that the existence of the joint tax boards that constitutes representation from both the federal and the state should have been able to do some of this harmonizing that you're proposing, scale down the numbers of these tax, and simplify onboarding, whether it's for fresh taxpayers or even for somebody who is a regular player. So how is the work of this committee? I understand you said tax is dynamic and requires change, but where should these changes really happen? Should it have required a committee, or this move should have happened around the joint tax board?
Well, for any government policy to have the buy-in of the populace, if you bring people if you include the stakeholders, it makes the recommendation or the policy very rich. So there's no disadvantage of having the committee. I'm also aware, by virtue of my position, that JTB is doing a lot of things in the area of harmonizing the various type of taxes we are paying. But we are here now, and it is what it is. The committee that is being set up directly by the president can most likely will get the support at the highest level once their recommendation is ready. And of course, the JTB, with the mechanism they have across the country, should be happy. We need to implement whatever is the outcome of the committee's recommendation. But I am aware that JTB is also currently doing something in that regard.
Okay, let's go to Mr. Babatunde now. Well, Mr. Babatunde, with an economy such as ours that could be said to be largely informal, one of the major issues has been how to get people in the informal sector to pay more taxes. So how can we do this in a structured manner such that it doesn't inflict so much hardship on Nigerians, especially in these times?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, but people have been talking a lot about informal sector. Sometimes I keep asking myself, these people are not ghosts. They live and operate within sight. So when people say it's hard to tax, I ask myself a couple of questions. And the questions are the people themselves making it impossible to be taxed? The people who are meant to tax them, are they actually exploring all opportunity to make sure that they are brought into the tax net? Then I'll link this back to the effectiveness of tax administration. Tax administration runs on data, and now we have several data. The BVN was a game changer. You could have access to banking information of anybody who is in Nigeria or a resident in Nigeria. And so the question is, what do we do with the data that is openly available? Are government agencies collaborating right from the company registrar, that is the CAC? Are they collaborating across board with others, even at the local government level? Because one way or the other, you must have given your data somewhere that government can use for the purposes of taxation. So for me, I don't belong to the school of people talking about informal sector as a problem. What I think should be the problem, how do we use technology? What would be the strategy to bring them on board? And I think in Nigeria, a step has been taken in that direction. To the Finance Act 2019, there was certain relief given to informal sector and people earning income on PE that gives them certain reliefs, which is an incentive, because you have to incentivize to bring people in. So if there's a cushion already in place, it means government will not have to build or need to get the relevant data, because some of the people you say are in the informal sector, they have large volumes of transactions. You can imagine, I don't want to mention it, but I know people who sell spare parts, people who sell building materials, and they get the kind of income that comes in. And you ask yourself, what's happening to our tax system? So I think across the three tiers of government, there must be deliberate strategy to annex technology and the available data. The president of the CITF was mentioning something earlier on. There was an aggregation of revenue across board, and that's what has brought the tax to GDP contribution to 10%. There was an effort provided by the Bureau of Statistics. So we could borrow from sourcing from data and lay it upon the incentive for people to come forth. And then I will also link it up with what the CBN has currently been doing, where you have a preponderance of cash-based transactions. It's difficult to tax because most of those transactions goes under the table. So the CBN should be a player in this field to make sure that you increase the number of people that have access to the use of banking transactions for the sake of data that will help tax administration and government tax effectively the informal sector. And I must put a caveat, not taxing them out of existence, but taxing them to be able to keep their books so that they can become multinationals of tomorrow. That all of us can actually benefit from.
Okay, Mr. Darkwa, just to further expand on some of the views that were put forward by the president, he talked about tax administration, you know, and today when you go to, you know, still staying with the examples of Ilya, when you go to the rural communities, you see all kinds of tax collectors. Some of them, depending on the kind of vehicles you are driving, they will stamp on you while driving on the road without committing any traffic offense. We see these local market women getting inundated with all kinds of tax receipts. If not, they are not allowed to operate within that small confines in the market. But the question really is, what do we need to do at that level? Because like you rightly pointed out, it doesn't appear to be a problem of compliance. It is more a problem of accountability. Some of these persons have been in this market for several decades. Nothing has been done around that place. Not even a concrete platform has been provided. If it rains, part of their goods are destroyed. Not even a functional public toilet. How do we begin to build what the president said, build the trust that would then begin to move people to voluntary compliance?
Okay. Thanks for that question, but let me start on the premise that Nigeria is ours as a country. And also to state here that there is so much of we against them in Nigeria. People who are not in government don't actually trust those in government. And most times those who are in government see those who are outside as victims. That's where you see those people you call tax collectors. Because just like the biblical times, tax collectors don't have a feeling for people. They just turn your head up, down, and collect. But that does not have a sustainable level. It doesn't promote citizen-government relationship. And that's not the kind of thing we want to see. We want to see domestic revenue mobilization based on trust, based on predictability, and like you said, based on something voluntary. It should be a give and take thing. I give my taxes because I want my country to be better. Then government take the taxes and go by here. The social contract is there. Yes, I will not say government has not been trying, but we need to do a rethink and a reset. Nigeria has beautiful initiatives, like the president of the CITM mentioned. JTB, I covered JTB activities for so many years. Brilliant talk, brilliant initiatives around reduction of multiplicity of taxes, nuisance taxes. Even the Nigeria Government Forum, they also have initiatives that are sponsored. And when you now look across the landscape in Nigeria, how many of the states, the local government, have actually imbibed this? There were suggestions around having consolidated revenue codes. When you check statistics, how many states have actually done that, having a compendium of those taxes with a view to weeding them down and using functional one? You don't need to have many tax handles to do it effectively. There could be a few that are predictable, and like part of the canon of taxation, you should be sure. There should be certainty. You should know how much you pay. Not that you go to the market, they start chasing you, you are carrying vegetable. So we need to do a lot of coming together. What is the purpose for collecting revenue? So that the citizens that bring the money, they will not be chased out of town. Because I agree with you, sometimes I ask myself, if the tables were to be turned around and I happen not to be a tax administrator, I'm selling tomato out there, how do I feel when a tout is chasing me up and down? Or I have a company vehicle that has signages are paid in Ogun State, and I'm going to Lagos State, some guys come across and they say, yes, you have to pay. So we need to do a lot of harmonization, and there has to be a consensus, whether at the JTB level, which is the premium organization that brings all the tax administration together, or at the Nigeria Government Forum, there should be an agreement that when these guidelines are rolled out, we will all walk the talk, not just coming around the table and talking and then you see something out there.
Okay. All right. Let me go to Mr. Samuel. We've had a lot of stories about how corporate entities, in some cases, deduct taxes from, say, employees, for instance, and yet not remit. And that's a major issue here. How do we clean up that kind of a system and get the institutions be much more effective in that regard?
Yeah, thank you very much. The moment you have your entity, your company registered with the Corporate Affairs Commission, you become an agent of government in carrying out some obligation, responsibility that the law has prescribed. If you're an employer of labor, you have the duty to deduct the payee from your workers. And not only deduct, you remit. You have a business relationship with people, suppliers, contractor. You are supposed to deduct withholding tax, which is an advance payment of tax. These obligations are there, and failure to carry out the obligations there are penalties. And I'm quite sure that the revenue agencies, either at the federal, by way of Federal Inland Revenue Service, or at the state, they have the mechanism of back duty audit, whereby whatever ought to have been collected that have not been collected, or what ought to have been collected but not remitted, they can always get that into government purse. And because of my position, I know the government is not doing badly in that area, but the government can do better. Also, we need to know why companies that have that responsibility sometimes don't carry out that responsibility. But I would think that is not too much of an area where we have problems. There's a mechanism in place to take care of that, whereby through the back duty, whatever ought to have been done that have not been done can be made possible. But I would rather want the government, through this committee, to look more towards the comment made by Mr. Babatunde. The collection of taxes by a non-state actor is dangerous for the system. And you have a lot of that at the local government level. It's pretty straightforward to know what the FRS is going to collect from you, and they will collect that. It's also pretty straightforward in some states to know what the Lagos State Internal Revenue Service, we know what they will collect from you. But the problem is mostly at the local government level, where we have a lot of state actors collecting taxes, printing receipts, and they are accountable to nobody. This is important because it is giving tax obligation a bad name to the extent that those who are sovereign, because they don't have choice, the kind of coercion the non-state actors bring around these people to collect taxes makes them to run away when they see the people who are from the structured system, who are the agencies licensed by government to collect taxes. So the government needs to look at this. All you need to do is to go to Balogun in the morning or go to my 12 and see the volume of business going on there. Just like my colleague said, when you talk of informal sector, they are not ghosts. All the government needs to do is to put infrastructure around the collection. And how do we do that? We do that with the harmonization of all the various database we have across the country. The country can no longer afford having database in silos. We need to harmonize so that wherever you go, and the good side of the policy from the CBN about a cashless economy has to be brought to the front burner at this time. It is no longer fashionable across the world for people to carry cash all around to transact their business. So bring everybody into the banking net to have their transactions. Then of course, once that is done, then you can collecting tax, assessing and collection will not be too difficult. They are my fear for the non-state actor, and the government needs the political will, because what we have realized is during election, those who have contributed in one form or the other are compensated, particularly at the local level, to say, okay, we give this area, go and collect taxes. These are people who knows next to nothing about taxation. So the government needs the political will to come into this area so that they can free the citizens from the burden of this harassment, blocking of the road. It is not done in any civilized environment. If you pay your taxes in Lagos, you should be able to move to Katsina, and all the states you meet across the road will respect the receipt you have paid in Lagos and vice versa. And now I'm aware that JTB has done a great job in this area, but the political leaders need to support JTB to ensure that we sanitize the tax system in the country.
All right. Mr. President, just before we wind down, my question is to Mr. Babatunde. We saw before now efforts by the previous governments to clean up tax system, especially those in default. We saw the VAT system, which was supposed to help regularize people who had gone several years without paying taxes. As part of all of this reform and the rest, do you think it will also be appropriate that we continue to visit the issue of people who had continued to evade taxes, who perhaps are making very good money from this system, as a way of bringing them up to speed? Because it does appear that we did not get as much as we had expected as a country when you look at that VAT program in comparison to other countries who carried out similar initiatives. I would like your 2 cents on this.
Okay, my 2 cents will be, it will not be fair for you as an high net worth individual who've had access to government service, because sometimes Nigeria will say, what do I get in return? But you have the police, you have the road to travel on, there are basic amenities around. So if you are benefiting more than even the lower level people who hand salaries and they are being taxed, you should pay your fair share of taxes. I think one of the things that government needs to do is to begin to shift focus. When you look at where our revenue comes from, you see we call something the Pareto principle. It's a 20 to 80 rule. Means 20% of taxpayers bring in the 80%. And I can tell you, in Nigeria, there are some companies, it is predictable they will pay their taxes because the governance rule says they must file their returns. Then you find some individuals who carry portfolios and they get the money and they don't pay. Like the president of the CITN said, the political will, tax administrations are just instruments of government. If the political will to support the tax administration, to tax such individuals who have massive wealth. There was a publication recent, about two years ago, by Hustler. It showed that the wealth of Nigeria and some West African countries are controlled by less than 10% of some of the. There are some people, less than about 3 or 4%, just of few individuals. So the focus should be on emerging areas such as the taxation of high net worth individuals. Taxation of properties should be taken as a priority because it shows that you have some money, and the question should be, can you fund your lifestyle? So those are new areas so that we can, those companies who have been faithful all the years, they deserve to be rewarded. They've been paying. So we should look at those high net worth individuals who are actually displaying their wealth. When you go to Facebook, you see someone being on a plane, on a shuttle, having yachts. How many of them pay taxes? There are houses up there. So I think the collaboration between the 3 tiers of government very significant in this season. And I must say, it's the state that even have the responsibility for personal income tax as it is. So there should be a collaboration between the National Tax Authority and the state level so that those who have the extra income, we are not begrudging them of their good fortune, but they must bring in, because the principle of taxation is also about the strong taking care of the weak. That's the kind of equilibrium we want to see in the system. And I think the FRS is doing well in that line, because currently the FRS has signed on to the Exchange of Information Protocol that allows them to have a 360 global view of all available incomes.
Thank you very much. We've been talking with the president of the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria, Mr. Samuel Agbelui. Thank you very much for finding time to be part of this very crucial conversation at this time in our national history. We also want to thank Mr. Babatunde Oladapo, the Executive Secretary of the West African Tax Administration Forum. It's been a pleasure talking to you both. And
Thank you.
we hope that when we come calling again, you will find time to continue to enlighten Nigeria and provide support for the committee in a bid to build a viral and strong nation. Thank you very much. We will take a short breather now. When we return at the top of the hour, the show continue. Please stay with us.
Yeah, bye.
All right, thank you for staying with us. You're watching Daybreak on Trust TV. Time to take a look at the dailies on Daybreak. And we'll begin with the lead story, which here on Daily Trust says, OPEC falls calls against funding of fossil fuels in Africa. They also have the riders. We need it to drive industrialization, African petroleum producers. NNPCL denies blocking oil and gas sector deals. You also have Alays IOC's divestment fears. Well, you also have other stories above the lead story. EcoBank versus Otudeco. Why we have not acted, says CBN. You find that on page 19. And also, reps ask NUC to halt fees hike in varsities. And that's on page 21. FMDQ exchange, traded derivatives market goes live on page 21. You also have a pictorial there showing you PDP Governors Forum after their meeting yesterday in Abuja. We have other stories. Insecurity rise up to occasion. PDP governors tell Tinubu on page 10. You have Tinubu orders manhunt for Plateau Benue killings on page 7. And then you have also man killed for stealing bread in Bayelsa. The next one, and the last one, as a matter of fact, union petitions FG over NSITF illegal recruitment, unremitted deductions. So these are the main stories on Daily Trust this morning.
All right, and moving on to the Punch newspaper, we have the major story there, Naira devaluation, Nigerian students face tough times in UK as tuition soars by 60%. New forex rate threatens overseas students, indebted scholars barred from classes, as parents beg FG for concession as tuition living costs climb amidst forex crisis. And to other stories, the SEC investigate Otudeco's FBN share acquisition. And PDP governors demand credible polls in Bayelsa, Imo, and Kogi. APC crisis deepens as Omishere labels Lukman black sheep. You want to know why that is? You pick up today's Punch newspaper. And to other stories, police kill sit-at-home enforcers. IPOB declares 14-day lockdown. And panel slams Autumn's automobile workshop impounds vehicle. And FNDQ Exchange launches derivative market. These are the major stories on the front page of the Punch newspaper.
All right, now let's take a look at the Guardian newspaper. The lead story on the Guardian says Akpabio, 13 senators to earn over 5.6 billion naira ex-governor's pension benefits. They also have other stories. Tinubu breaks silence, orders arrest of Plateau Benue killings masterminds. FMDQ introduces exchange-traded derivatives market. You have hotel staff to die by hanging for killing manager, UK returnee. Separating empowerment projects from First Lady's vanities. It is a story you would like to take a look at. Now, coalition seeks Remi Gado's sack, revisit of 2006 report on Kwankwaso. Reps tackle banks over illegal deductions, indiscriminate charges. These are the main stories on The Guardian this morning.
We move on to the Nigerian News Direct, and the front page, the major story there, it's on the Plateau killings. Tinubu talks tough, instructs security agencies to locate masterminds. IGP NSA pledges improved synergy to improve security. Nigerians will go about their business without fear under my watch. And that's coming from the Army Chief. And we have a front page photo there coming from the NOG events ongoing in Abuja. And there you find in the middle the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Petroleum, Ambassador Aduda, flanked by other major stakeholders in the oil and gas industry. I could see there the CEO of the Nigeria Content Board as well as Mele Kyari. To other stories, 10th National Assembly leadership, Akpabio ignores APC National Working Committee, names Senate Committee Chairman. And Customs intercept 37 trailer loads of rice, 173,000 litres of petrol in Ogun. A delayed IPO, we will make initial public offering soon, NNPCL GCEO. And revenue leakages halt $5 billion paid as freight to foreign ship owners. This is coming from the LCCI to the federal government. And right above the name marks there, Prince Dr. Samuel Ibiyemi, 1968 to 2003. Big Sam, big impact. That's one, the publisher of News Direct, who passed on last week. Ibiyemi contributed immensely or immeasurably to the advancement of local content in Nigeria. That's the NCDMB Executive Secretary Wabote. These are the major stories on the front page of the Nigerian News Direct.
All right. Now, on the Nation newspaper this morning, we have a border reopening plan in progress, says Customs CG. Also, no ministers list yet, says APC. Mustafa Bin Tube is Jais Bank board chairman. You have also how Wike helped Tinubu to win Rivers by Okocha. Also, other stories. Intercepted vessel destroyed in Delta with 150,000 metric tons of crude worth $86.8 million. That's huge loss on the part of the Nigerian government, if I may. You also have Senate to investigate 99.3 trillion naira spent on petrol subsidy in 30 months. These are the main stories on the Nation newspaper.
All right, moving on to the Daily Sun. And somebody said to me that you can't do without the Sun. All right, House of Reps stops CBN Universities, says no Apex Bank social media KYC policy, and Varsity's Unity School tuition fee hike. Well, timely intervention if you like, but let's see what alternatives they are offering. And Senate standing committees, Akpabio snub ex-governors, PDP ranking senators, names heads of appropriation and public accounts, 6 committees. Experts list causes solution to Nigeria's rising inflation. And anger, tension in Southeast as ECPA declares 2 weeks sit-at-home from July 31st. And quickly to other rundown, the insecurity, Southeast governors to meet Tinubu. Subsidy removal, why we are yet to resume petrol imports, oil marketers. Benue Asset Recovery Committee storms house, cuts away exotic vehicles. And then NPCL gearing up for IPO, revealed by Kerry. And Forbes 2023 index, Dangote still Africa's richest for the 12th consecutive year.
All right. Well, quite a number of interesting stories this morning on the papers. We'll now take a look at some perspectives on these stories. We have joining us via Zoom, Ben Sherman, the former director of News Voice of Nigeria, who is joining us to give some of the perspectives here. Thank you so much, Ben Sherman, for joining us this morning. Yes. All right. Well, let's begin with one of the stories that has bothered Nigerians in the past few days, and that has generated a lot of concern. I'm talking about the intercepted vessel destroyed in Delta State. This morning, the Nation newspaper is reporting that vessel was burned in Delta State with 150,000 metric tons of crude worth $86.8 million. I'd like to get your take on that.
Well, Nigeria, I believe, is a country that must be governed by laws. If some people feel they want to buy crude oil from Nigeria, they should buy from the appropriate authorities. But the situation where some people will go behind the scene to buy that, I mean, is giving blessing to corruption. I remember in Liberia, when diamond was classified globally as a blood diamond, then President Goodluck Jonathan came and said, crude oil too should be treated as a kind of blood crude oil. In other words, you have to account for the sources of this crude oil. You don't just receive and you refine and send back to Nigeria. There has to be a way of doing it legally. And that is why for the Navy, when we're talking of seafarers and we're talking of the coastline, the Gulf of Guinea becoming very safe for business, this is time the Navy should show what it can do, and that's what exactly it is doing. As for me, I support what the Navy is doing.
Okay, just to understand that support, because myself and Ayuba were lost in thought when we understood that immediately this arrest was made, that ship, whatever the economic value, and that size of crude, over 800 million, was destroyed. If we make reference to what you said with regards to the blood diamond, does it mean that when you find people who have bought this diamond illegally, you destroy the diamond while trying to send a lesson? I thought that at the time that we wanted more revenues, this is our resources established, stolen. This is a ship that has been operating in our territorial waters for more than 2 years under the radar. And these are things that we are saving money to buy to enhance operation within our waterways. Why not confiscate those assets the way we see with fighting crimes internally? Why the rush to destroy that ship and all the evidence that's on board?
Yeah, you see, sometimes you just have to take drastic actions, because a situation where, whether they are Nigerians or Nigerian collaborators, you've been warned, and these are the consequences. Now, if you look at the cost of that ship compared with the content of that ship, the content is just one small dot on top of letter I. Therefore, when you take this kind of drastic action, it serves as deterrent. Yes, for the environment, there's going to be some kind of destruction to the environment. But again, in terms of making the environment clean, I hope that the Navy also has a way of doing it, because they cannot just do it without the support of the Nigerian government. And that is why I stand by it. I support the Navy. I support the Nigerian authorities. Those who think that Nigeria is a joke, a huge joke, this is just the price they have to pay. Their ships will have to get sink, and that is what has happened. If you're talking of the diamond that gets destroyed, or the diamond was not destroyed, a kind of. But again, for the Navy, for these unwanted businesses, you've seen that they've been kind of arresting seafarers and even those on board, but nothing has happened. Remember, it happened with some Russians too. But the Nigerian authorities felt they should mark, their authority on all of that. If they want to do business, do it legally. Can Nigerians also go and do it that way in Iran? Can they do it in Iraq?
Mr.
Why is
Chairman,
it that Nigeria is a place where people will just do it?
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if the Navy can take credit for this. From the statement of the NNPCL, they talk about the private security company that was contracted by the government to make this arrest and to safeguard those axes for the Nigerian government. Yes, it's in collaboration with the Nigerian Navy, as we've seen that they are part of that. It's more of a joint kind of an effort. But we know that the private security company is leading in this regard. So that's one leg of the issue here. The second issue is that the grounds that the Nigerian people are having with this whole thing is the fact that this product, the NNPCL talked about 800,000 liters of crude oil. It's Nigeria's, resources. So what those who are making the argument are saying is that, why are you destroying what belongs to Nigeria just because the thief has stolen it? Just you feel you want to make it to serve as a deterrent. Why can't the Nigerian government seize these resources and put it to its own use? Think about how much crude oil Nigeria produces itself. Nigerian government itself produces per day, at least within the range of 1.9 to 2 million barrels per day. So if you have up to 800,000 liters of crude stolen, shouldn't the government find a better way of making use of this by seizing it instead of just destroying everything?
You see, seizures have been taking place. Seizing has been taking place. And it's just like you say, because Boko Haram are Nigerians, or ISWAP, they are Nigerians. Therefore, you handle them with kid gloves. If these pirates or these thieves feel that they can do whatever they feel like in Nigeria, time has come that they are shown that there is a government on ground, that whatever they are doing is criminal and criminalities are not allowed, and that is why the Nigerian government is doing what it is doing. If you say the Navy, you cannot take the entire credit, but I want to tell you, the capability to sink a ship or to carry what you call an aerial attack on any batch or ship belongs to the Navy, and they do that in concert with the Air Force. Remember, there's what is called joint operations with the Nigerian Army. They have the Marine Army. They also have the Air Force. You have the Navy, and of course, it's the job of the Navy as the lead agency when it comes to fighting criminality along the sea or coastline. So the Navy still has a job to do. But when we cry more of the tea that is a kind of poured away and a tumbler that belongs to another person, I think that if we get it right, we'll buy more of these tumblers, and of course, we still have more of this tea to enjoy as a corporate entity called Nigeria.
All right, away from the ship, some of the papers are reporting this morning that the president had given a marching order for the military to fish out those behind the recent killings that we have seen, upsurging the recent killings we have seen in Plateau and Benue. The president spoke very strongly yesterday through his special advisor on strategy, and Information, Mr. Aleke. If you recall, under the last administration, we were always getting statements like this where the president frowns at what had happened and usually give charges. Isn't it time that we go beyond just merely coming onto the media to say the president has charged? What differently should we be doing, especially if you think of these states as the food belts of this country that is currently battling with raging inflation figures?
Yeah, you see, when President Buhari felt that there were too many attacks in the northeastern part of this country, he decided and in fact directed that all service chiefs should move to Maiduguri, and that was how you find the likes of General Yusuf Tukur Buratai operating from the fringes of the northeast. And when there were too many attacks in Benue, the president then also directed the Inspector General of the Nigerian Police to move to Makurdi, stay in Benue, go to areas where there were these attacks. And for what is happening today, I don't think that the service chiefs would begin to wait for the president to give a marching order. And we are also tired of what we call statements. We condemn the dastardly act. We're going to take decisive action and all that stuff. What we want is already the GOC in Jos has already moved to areas where there are attacks. So we expect to see most of this. And Lagbaja is not, Tariq Lagbaja is not new to some of these things. In southern Kaduna, he was always moving along with his soldiers. In Birnin-Gwari, he was also doing the same thing. So these are people who also served under past army chiefs who indeed were always going to the trenches. So they are borrowing from their headmasters, so to speak. And therefore, we don't even need to wait for the president to say, I command you. Yes, he's the commander-in-chief. But in as much as you know the brief, why you are the head of an agency, you move on. And that is why we Nigerians should support the military to ensure that this war that has continued to linger for this long comes to an end. So we expect that they move with the arsenal. The Nigerian army just finished their year in Ibadan, where indeed Lagbaja said he would want a situation where Nigerians, in as much as they want, you can start your journey 9 p.m., 1 a.m., and go to wherever you want, just like it happened those days. If you had a problem, you want to sleep anywhere, you just branch to any village, people will just welcome you. He's looking forward to that kind of a situation. And so we want the service chiefs to move to the theater where these things are happening. People, they should not stay just
okay. It looks like
in their offices and
we've lost Ben Sherman.
We see that. I see that even during the Army Day celebration, many of these soldiers who performed very well from the ranks of brigadier up to even lance corporal, they were rewarded for hard work. Some of them kind of surrendered their lives so that the rest of all of us can live. They were awake so that they were asleep so that the rest of us can be asleep. And so for that reason, they were singled out for this kind of act and are rewarded. So it's good thing that you give the morale. Soldiers will have to be to kind of given their rights, their entitlements, boost their morale, and their heads must also go to war too.
All right. Okay, let's move on to another story now. The lead story on the Guardian newspaper is a story of interest here, I believe, for many who are watching. The lead story says Akpabio, 13 senators to earn over 5.6 billion naira, ex-governor's pension and benefits. And that's part of the conversation that a lot of people have been having in the country with regards to the issue of cost of governance and the issue of, government's efforts to show up revenue to be able to do more instead of borrowing. And here we have ex-governors, who are just 13 in number, getting up to 5.6 billion naira as pension. I also know that some have voluntarily decided that they don't want this pension. I can always single out Benga Daniels, former governor, who posted on his Twitter page, I think some days ago, about a week or so, as asking the state government that to stop the payment of his pension. Do you think that this is something that should be considered by some of these governors at this point in time right now?
You see, this is capitalism taken to the extreme, the most terrible extreme so far, without conscience. Some of these governors were at the point commissioners. And from commission, in fact, they retired and became politicians, got their pension, became commissioners, got their pension, became governors, got their pension. Some became ministers, got their pension, moved again to be senators. And you see, every state becoming so lean. And that's why former President Obasanjo is also saying that with conscience and without conscience, why should lawmakers be the ones to fix their own salaries? I mean, it's like me now. You say, okay, Ben, look, you have the power, fix the salary you want. It doesn't work that way. They have to go via the Salaries and Wages Commission, just like any other Nigerian. And in terms of conscience, why would a governor have all this? Why should governors have this kind of advantages over the rest of the people who took them there, who voted them there? In terms of rain, come shine, they all were there, whether in the dark or in broad daylight, they all were there. Some surrendered their vehicles for campaigns here and there. Now, this is what they are receiving. Nothing,
yeah, we are dealing with a
nothing.
morality issue here, because I'm not sure if there's any law that says that they should not, benefit or get these benefits or these pensions and the like. So what exactly should we do? I mean, the president has consistently asked Nigerians to make sacrifices at times like this, especially with the removal of the fuel subsidy and, some of the difficulties that Nigerians are having to deal with. They are being asked to make sacrifices. So what should be the appeal of maybe government or Nigerians to some of these politicians, since there is no law that says that they are not entitled to some of these pensions and benefits?
If there is no codified law, if there is no written law, but there is that conscience that is written in the hearts of men and women. For the Christians, I mean, those who indeed imbibe Catholicism, there's this see, judge, and act. But look, will you just be walking around, you see one bully kicking and squeezing one small boy, and you just walk past, you say, oh, there's no law for me to protect that boy? What about your conscience? What does your conscience say? Does it not prick you that you should do something? You've seen it, this thing is bad, but what did you do? You walked away? No. So yes, it's not written, but we have to also obey our individual consciences. If you feel that you've thrown away conscience, thrown away decorum, then what is happening? What really are you teaching your children? So, in other words, Nigerians are saying, have this conscience, this thing is just too much for you. And when it is too much for you, you just continue to gather. And that's why, like Bishop Kuka will always say, you see, the rich has stolen so much from the poor. And that is why the rich is building all sorts of fences, high fences, barbed wire, all sorts of dogs around their compounds. Now, to do what? Just to send away the poor. But the poor are also awake. What do they want to do? They want to enter into that secured compound and get what belongs to them. And society is worse for it. So why should we reach this level just because of capitalism? If we profess we are that religious, when people they were campaigning, you saw them going to traditional rulers' places to look for a blessing, going to chief imams, going to bishops, going to pastors. Lord, bless me, I'll do this. And when they won elections, there's this thing you swear to and old, you say you do justice to all manner of people, irrespective of color, religion, or creed. But what do we see? Instead of that creed, we are seeing greed. And so it's not helping Nigeria at all, and we can't develop this way.
All right, Mr. Ben. I think there are some government positions that sort of prohibits earning two salaries from the same governments, and we have these issues proliferated across platforms. The Anambra State governor served as a central bank governor. Now it's Anambra governor and is entitled to pension from the previous place. So I hope it's something that we concretize going forward to stop leakages. But the Punch this morning is reporting the story on the 2-week sit-at-home notification for the people of the Southeast. A couple of weeks ago, we saw how some persons violated that instructions, engendered by the instruction of the governor, I think in Enugu State. And the people were left to their own fate because these guys showed up, these non-state actors showed up and shot at these women who had gone to the market in defiance of the sit-at-home order. What do we do to stop what has become a perpetual economic sabotage of the activities in the Southeast? Because clearly, you can't say that this is what the Southeast people, we have completely lost, the governance at that place has lost its will, and now we have non-state actors, some of them sitting in several kilometers away from this climb or even Africa, passing instructions to people that sort of cripple the life of individuals in this state, and it does appear that nothing can be done about it.
Something can be done about it. To start with, when I saw pupils being told to lie down, including their teachers, for disobeying sit-at-home order, I also saw some people looking like the children cartoon dressed like Superman, and were busy just shooting AK-47, shooting some fellows. They were told to stay at home, and they were therefore enforcing it. See, there's a limit as to how things will go on. If you do that for 2 weeks, the southeastern part of this country that is so, active in economic activities, you now say they should stay home. You see, there's going to be a limit. There's going to be combustion. There's going to be explosion, because the moment inside there is that internal heat, there's bound to be an explosion. What do we do? The man who is in Finland and giving directives is busy enjoying his freedom of everything, including his business. I think diplomatically, Nigeria should kind of begin to talk with the Finnish embassy. Apart from that, men and women of thought in the southeastern part of this country, talking of the Emekas and Nyaokus of this world and many other people of note, they should also be called upon to all the General Hejirikas, Nwachukus, all of them, all of them, you also bring them on board. I think that something somewhere will be done. And again, some people say, yeah, you can do some negotiations and all that stuff. Sometimes some people will say, the fact that a giant shakes hand with a dwarf has never made that giant a dwarf. Can the federal government, a kind of at the point, lean backwards to a kind of see what really is wrong? These are Nigerians against Nigerians. But if if you're saying you are doing agitations in terms of looking for fair shares of national cake of this country, but does it follow that you kill your citizens? These are people you also want to have them to have this same fair share of the national cake. Why kill them? So I think that the bad and the bad plus the bad, including the bad multiplied by the bad, will never make it good for the Southeast.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Ben Sheman, for joining us on Daybreak and sharing your perspectives with us on some of the stories that we have. We look forward to having you again on the program.
Thank you very much. My pleasure.
All right. Okay, we'll take a short breather now, and then when we return, the show will continue. Join us again. All right, thank you for staying with us. You're watching Daybreak on Trust TV. Now, we'll take a look at some of the stories that we have today, just to give you a heads up in case you've missed some of the stories earlier. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has directed security agencies to fish out the masterminds of what he called dastardly acts of killings in Mangu local government area of Plateau State and parts of Benue State. The president, in a statement issued by his spokesman, Dele Alake, condemned the most recent killings. The president expressed sadness and grief over the latest round of violence in Plateau State, describing the festering reprisal attacks as needless and avoidable bloodletting among communities in the two states. He, however, charged the governments of Plateau and Benue states and emergency response agencies to provide support and immediate relief to victims who have been displaced as a result of the conflicts. The president reaffirmed his government's determination to stamp out violent crimes and all forms of criminality everywhere in Nigeria. President Tinubu urged community leaders, religious leaders, traditional rulers, socio-cultural organizations, as well as the leadership of Arewa Consultative Forum, the Jamaatul Nasrul Islam and Christian Association of Nigeria to work together to help foster genuine and long-lasting peace, rebuild trust, and restore harmony to the conflict areas.
All right, the Chief of Army Staff, Major General Tori Lagbaja, said the Nigerian Army under his watch is making efforts to make every region in the country safe and secure. He stated this during an interactive session with media executives on Wednesday in Ibadan, the Oyo State capital, as part of the activities marking the 2023 Nigerian Army Day celebration. General Lagbaja said it was his desire that Nigerians would experience peace, which citizens can do business even during odd hours. He noted that the people desire to go back to their farms and live normally as law-abiding Nigerians. The army, he said, will work to defeat banditry and kidnapping, which are being operated freely in some communities, as well as entrench in the northwest, as they have achieved in the northeast region. The Chief of Army Staff also expressed their determination to return to that era where people live peacefully in Plateau and parts of the southern Kaduna and other places currently experiencing security challenges.
All right. Now, the Acting Controller General of Nigeria Customs Service, Wale Adeni, has clarified that not all borders in the country have been reopened and thorough review process is currently underway. He disclosed this to State House correspondents after meeting with President Bola Tinubu at the presidential villa. According to him, while selected strategic borders were reopened in 2022, a review process is currently underway to assess the objectives of the border closure. The Customs Boss also disclosed that as part of efforts to enhance border security and regional integration, he plans to visit the Republic of Benin to engage in discussions with their customs administrations. According to him, the aim is to foster collaboration, address border security concerns, facilitate importation across the border, and explore technological solutions to complex border challenges. He said while some border areas have reported seizures of fuel, the rate of smuggling has considerably reduced. Adeni expressed hope that ongoing policies being implemented by the government will eventually eliminate fuel smuggling across borders.
Moving on to some of our packages on this, the Senate President, Godswill Akpabio, has appointed chairman of some committees in the Senate. The Senate President made the announcement during Tuesday plenary session. The report.
According to the Senate President, Godswill Akpabio, Solomon Adeola, who head the Appropriation Committee, while Ali Ndume is the vice chairman. Ahmed Wadada is heading the Public Accounts Committee, while Adaramon Raphael is chairman Senate Committee on Media. Others are Committee on Rules and Business, headed by Titus Sam Tangeta, Committee on Senate Services, led by Sunday Karimu, and Code of Conduct and Public Petitions, headed by Okechukwu Eze. The Committee on National Security and Intelligence has Shehu Buba Umar as its head, while Garuba Musa leading that on legislative compliance. Announcing the composition of the committees, the Senate President Godswill Akpabio also inaugurated the Selection Committee. While the Selection Committee comprises all principal officers, Akpabio said a probation committee headed by Solomon Adeola was set up in the event of any emergency supplementary budget that may arise from the executive. The inauguration is in line with Senate standing rules, which empowers the Parliament to, within 14 days after inauguration, set up the aforementioned committees.
Distinguished Senators Adeola Solomon Olamileko will be the chairman, followed by Distinguished Senator Mohammed Ali Ndume as vice chairman.
The names of other committee chairmen are to be announced at a later date. Rashidat Yusuf for Trust TV News.
Meanwhile, the House of Representatives has appealed to the National Security Advisor to declare the killings in Plateau State a national emergency. This was sequel to a motion of urgent public importance by Representative Dachung Bagos from Plateau State on terrorist attacks on Mangu communities of Mangu and Bokos Federal Constituency, Mangu-Bokos Federal Constituency rather, of Plateau State on Tuesday as plenary. The report.
The recent terrorist attacks on the people of Mangu local government and neighboring communities have left more than 300 persons dead and others seriously injured, property destroyed, and over 18,000 people displaced at different IDP camps within the local government area. According to the lawmaker, most of the victims that sustained various degrees of injuries are currently receiving medical attention at different hospitals within the state. He expressed worry that the continuous attack by terrorist groups in the communities, if not addressed immediately, will negatively affect farming, which will worsen the existing food crisis in the communities.
Concerned that most of my people live in fear of the unknown due to insecurity and can no longer access their farmlands and their mining sites. Further concerned that unless the issue of insecurity is handled with doggedness at all levels in the country, citizens will experience food shortage, as Plateau is one of the main producers of food crops in the country.
Lawmakers want security operatives to provide aerial surveillance and support to flush out the terrorists and destroy their camps to avoid reoccurrence and allow farmers to return to their farms and ancestral homes.
Handle the killings going on in Plateau State as a national emergency because of the gravity of which these killings are being done and the constant reoccurrence. I believe if the Office of the National Security Advisor comes into this, there will be a difference.
The House unanimously adopted the motion and urged the Secretary to the Government of the Federation to direct the Federal Ministry of Humanitarian Affairs and Disaster Management and Social Development through the National Emergency Management Agency NEMA and the National Commission for Refugees, Migrants and Internally Displaced Persons to immediately provide relief materials to victims of the attacks in the communities within Mangu local government area. In another development, the House of Representatives has called for the suspension of the implementation of increase in tuition fees in universities. This was equal to a motion sponsored by Aliyu Sani Madaki, who noted the hike in fees by universities is happening against the worsening poverty level in the country, inflation high rate of employment, and the recent fuel price hike.
Also concerned that the increase could cause disruptions for a number of students who could not afford the fees, while many of them could be forced to depart their studies. Others could drop out. Worried that the hike may aggravate the already volatile situation in the country, as students are already making threats which could lead to an uprising. with grievous consequence for the country as a whole.
He urged the National Universities Commission to immediately halt implementation of the increase in fees by federal universities while mandating the Committee on Tertiary Education and Services, when constituted, to investigate the increase in fees by federal universities across the country with a view to finding lasting solutions to the challenges in the tertiary education sector.
And moving on, the Small and Medium Enterprise Development Agency of Nigeria, SMEDEN, says Nigeria's businesses struggle to compete and usually fall after 5 years. According to SMEDEN, the business sector now faces a harsher environment fueled by fuel subsidy removal, forest fluctuations, insecurity, and consistent rise in the inflation figures. All these, accompanied by other debilitating factors, have directly triggered a hike in the price of goods and services, which does not only affect the consumer, but also entrepreneurs. Chamon Debeg brings us more.
Nigerian businesses are struggling to stay afloat amidst a myriad of challenges that are pushing many entrepreneurs to spend more on buying products. Despite spending more, there has been a significant decline in profit due to the removal of fuel subsidy, which has led to an astronomical increase in prices of commodities. This, to many, is now a major stumbling block to the growth of Nigerian businesses. Small business owner Moses Obi gives an insight into his personal struggles.
Prices have gone up, and then the purchasing power of your customer has gone down. So somebody that back in the days be able to come out and maybe order 2 fish and 3 chicken, now if they even order 1 chicken, you'll be grateful. With every new thing that happens, I am being pushed further and further down the ladder, and I'm being forced to spend even more money while I am consistently making less money. And then to make it worse, the less money that I'm even making is losing value consistently.
Though businesses have adjusted their prices to fit today's economic realities, the fact remains that the salary of the average Nigerian remains the same while the cost of living is on a constant hike. This means that even with a price adjustment, the diminishing purchasing power of their consumer base does little to keep the businesses running.
As we are right now, we've had to close down our branch and have moved to delivering from home and cooking from home, because the price of rent, trying to eke out rent while trying to maintain prices that are customer friendly and being able to meet up with my expenses, rent is a burden I can't necessarily handle.
According to a survey by SMEDEN, Nigeria has approximately 39.6 million SMEs, of which about 38 million are nano and micro enterprises. The agency says 75% of these businesses depend on fuel as an alternative means of power, with their generators running for 8 to 9 hours per day on average. Chief Strategy Officer to the DG of SMEDEN, Onesi Lawani, explains the impact on the mortality rate of SMEs in Nigeria, which he noted was already high.
Globally, the mortality rate of MSMEs, especially here in Nigeria, those that survive, when you start an enterprise, the ones that survive maybe up to the 50 or beyond their 50 is less than 30–40%. So that means you have over 60 out of every 100 enterprises closing or shutting down. We still have high rate of unemployment. So the last time I went through some document, unemployment rate amongst the youth, this is 41%. Now, if you now have more of these 39 million MSMEs shutting down, you cannot imagine what's going to happen to our unemployment market.
SMEDEN says it is currently holding discussions with other stakeholders to develop intervention plans for SMEs that will prevent a figure drop in the 39 million SMEs present in the country, as it emphasizes the need for SMEs to thrive since they contribute 48% of Nigeria's GDP and is responsible for over 85% of employment in the country. Chamun Dabeng, Trust TV News, Abuja.
All right. And that wraps it up for Daybreak this morning. We hope that you join us again tomorrow for another time on the program. For those who have missed, well, if not missed, you can always catch up across all our social media platforms and also on our YouTube. I am Ayuba Ilya. Thanks for watching.
And Sunday Michael, let's do this again tomorrow.